For example, someone might have told you, "Hey, you walk kind of like your dad, or your smile is kind of like your mom, or your eyes are like one of your uncles or your grandparents." And so there's always been this notion of inherited traits. But it wasn't until the 1800s that started to be studied in a more scientific way with Gregor Mendel, the father of genetics. But even then, even Mendel, who was starting to understand the mechanisms of, or he was trying to understand how inheritance happens, and he even did start to breed certain types of things. Even he didn't know exactly what was the molecular basis for inheritance. And the answer to that question wasn't figured out until fairly recent times, until the mid 20th century, not until the structure of DNA was established by Watson and Crick. And their work was based on the work of many other folks like Rosalind Franklin, who essentially provided the bulk of the data for Watson and Crick's work, Maurice Wilkins, and many other folks. But it was really the structure of DNA that made people say, "Hey, that looks like the molecule that's storing the information." Just to be clear, DNA wasn't discovered in 1953. DNA was discovered in the mid 1800s. It was this kind of this molecule that was inside of nuclei of cells. And for some time, people said, "Oh, maybe this could be a molecular basis of inheritance." You know, you can imagine what you would need to be a molecular basis of inheritance. It would have to be a molecule or a series of molecules that could contain information, that could be replicated, that could be expressed in some way. But it wasn't until 1953 when this double helix structure of DNA was established that people said, "Hey, this looks like our molecule." So first, let's just talk about the structure here, and then actually we'll talk about where this name DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, comes from, and then we'll talk a little bit about why the structure lends itself well to something that stores information, that can replicate its information, and that could express its information. We might go in depth on the expression of information in future videos. So this structure right over here, and this is a visual depiction of a DNA molecule. You can view this as kind of a twisted ladder. It has these two, I guess you could say, sides of the ladder that are twisted. That is one side right over there, and then it is another side. There's another side right over here. And in between those two sides, or connecting those two sides of that twisted ladder, you have these rungs. And these rungs are actually where the information, the genetic information, is, I guess you could say, stored in some way. Because these rungs, it's a sequence of different bases. And when I say bases, you say, "Wait, this says acid. Why are you saying bases right over here?" Well, the word deoxyribonucleic acid comes from the fact that this backbone is made up of a combination of sugar and phosphate. And the sugar that makes up the backbone is deoxyribose. So that's essentially the D in DNA. And then the phosphate group is acidic, and that's where you get the acid part of it. And nucleic is, hey, this was found in nuclei of cells. It is nucleic acid, deoxyribonucleic acid. But it's not, it is actually mildly acidic all in total, but for every acid, it actually also has a base. And that base, those bases form the rung of the ladders. And actually, each rung is a pair of bases. And as I said, that's where the information is actually stored. But what am I talking about? Well, let me talk about the 4 different bases that make up the rungs of a DNA molecule. So you have adenine. Adenine. And so, for example, this part right over here, this section of that rung might be adenine. Maybe this right over here is adenine. This right over here. Remember, each of these rungs are made up by, it's a pair of bases. And that might be adenine. Maybe this is adenine. I can stop there. I'll do a little more adenine. Maybe that's adenine right over there. And adenine always pairs with the base thymine. So let me write that down. So adenine pairs with thymine. Thymine. So if that's an adenine there, then this is going to be a thymine. If this is an adenine, then this is going to be a thymine. Or if I drew the thymine first, well, I'll say, okay, it's going to pair with an adenine. So this is going to be a thymine right over here. This is going to be a thymine. If I were to draw this, this would be a thymine right over here. Now, the other 2 bases, you have cytosine, which pairs with guanine, or guanine that pairs with cytosine. So guanine, and we're not going to go into the molecular structure of these bases just yet, although these are good names to know because they show up a lot and they really form kind of the code, your genetic code. Guanine pairs with cytosine. Guanine and cytosine. Cytosine. So actually, if this is, let's say there's some cytosine there, let's say cytosine right over here, maybe this is cytosine, maybe this is cytosine, maybe this is cytosine, this is cytosine, hey, maybe this is cytosine, then it always pairs with the guanine. If we're talking about, so let's see, this is guanine then, and this will be guanine, this is guanine, this is guanine. I actually didn't draw stuff here, but this is guanine. I didn't say what these could be, but these would be made of pairs of, they could be adenine-thymine pairs, and it could be adenine on either side, or the thymine on either side, and they could be made of guanine-cytosine pairs, where the guanine or the cytosine is on the other side. Actually, just to make it a little bit more complete, let me just color in the rungs here as best as I can. So those are guanine, so they're going to pair with cytosine, pair with cytosine, pair with cytosine. And when it's drawn this way, you might start to see how this is essentially a code. The order of which the bases I guess the order in which we have the sequence of these bases essentially encode the information that make you you. And you could debate, well, how much of it is nature versus nurture? And when people say nature, it's literally genetic, and that's an ongoing debate. But it does code for things like your hair color. When you see that your smile is similar to your parents, it is because that information, to a large degree, is encoded genetically. It affects a lot of what makes you you, and actually not even just within a species, but also across species. Humans have more genetic material in common with other humans than they do with, say, a plant. But all living creatures, as we know them, have genetic information. This is the basis by which they are passing down their actual traits. Now, you might be saying, well, how much genetic information does a human being have? And the number will either disappoint you or you might find it mind-boggling. The human genome, and every species has a different number of base pairs, to a large degree correlated with how complex they are, although not always, but the human genome has 6 million, sorry, not 6 million, 6 billion. 6 million would be disappointing, even billion might be disappointing. 6 billion base pairs. 6 billion base pairs, and when you have your full complement of chromosomes, and this is in most of the cells in your body, and outside of your sex cells, the sperm or the egg cells, this is going to be spread over 46 chromosomes. 46 chromosomes, or I guess you could say 23 pair of chromosomes. So if you divide 6 billion by 46, you get a little over, on average, 100 million, I think it's 100 and something million base pairs per chromosome. And some chromosomes are longer, actually, some of the longest are over 200 million, and some might be shorter. That's just on average. Now, this number might be exciting. You're like, oh, I thought I was a simple creature. I didn't know I was this complex. 6 billion, that's a lot of base pairs. That feels like a lot of information. For others of you, it might not feel so great. You might say, oh, I could store this much information on a modern thumb drive or on a hard disk. I thought I was more unique than that. And of course, we all are special and unique. But you might say, oh, 6 billion base pairs. I thought I was infinitely complex and whatever else. And there's some arguments for that along some other directions. This is the approximate length, I guess you could say, the approximate size of the actual human genome. And when we talk about chromosomes, and we'll talk about chromosomes in much more depth, imagine taking this zoomed in thing that you have right over here. And over here, I don't know how many we have, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. We have about 20 base pairs depicted here. Imagine if you had about 200 million of these base pairs, and then you were to take this thing and you were to kind of coil it up into that thing is a chromosome. Is a chromosome. And you're saying, wait, I have that much information in most of the cells of my body? This thing is incredibly compact. And if you said that, I would say, yes, you are correct. The radius of the DNA molecule is on the order of 1 nanometer. 1 nanometer, which is a billionth of a meter. So you can start to assess kind of the scale of this thing. This is a very dense way to actually store information. But just to have an appreciation of, and you might have seen it when I was coloring in, on why the structure lends itself to replicate the information or even to be able to translate or express the information. Let's think about if you were to take this ladder and you were to just kind of split all the base pairs. So you just have 1/2 of them. So you essentially have half of the ladder. And so if you only have half of the ladder, you're able to construct the other half of the ladder. Let's take an example. Let's say, and I'll just use the first letter to abbreviate for each of these bases. Let's say you have some. So let's say this is the sugar phosphate backbone right over here. So this could be one of the sides. And let's say there's some adenine. Actually, I'm doing the right color. So you've got some adenine. Maybe some adenine right over here. Maybe there's an adenine there. Maybe you have some thymine. Maybe thymine right over here. Then you have some guanine, and then let's say you have some cytosine, and you have some cytosine. So with just half of this ladder, I guess you could say, you're able to construct the other half, and that's actually how DNA replicates. This ladder splits, and then each of those two halves of that ladder are able to construct versions of the other half, or versions of the other half are able to be constructed on top of that half. So how does that happen? Well, it's based on how these bases pair. Adenine always pairs with thymine if we're talking about DNA. So if you have an A there, you're going to have a T on this end, T on this end. T's right all over here, T right over there. If you have a T on that end, you're going to have an A right over there, A. If you have a G, a guanine on this side, you're going to have a cytosine on the other side. Cytosine, and if you have a cytosine, you're going to have a guanine on the other side. And so hopefully that gives you an appreciation of how DNA can replicate itself. And as we'll see also, how this information can be translated to other forms of either related molecules, but eventually to proteins. And just to kind of round out this video, to get a real visual sense of what the DNA molecule looks like, or I guess a different visual depiction from this, I found this animated GIF that, if you haven't fully digested what a double helix looks like, this is it. And you see your sugar phosphate bases here. You see kind of the sugars and the phosphates alternating along this backbone. And then the rungs of the ladder are these base pairs. So this is one of the bases. That's its corresponding, I guess you could say, partner. And you could see that along all the way up and down this molecule. Very exciting.
Okay, let's stop share. All right, so what did that trigger for anybody?
But very naive question here, right? I take my mother's face and my dad's face. I have 4 quadrants, right? And I'm a kind of replica of a combination of the two. So what happened if, will you say that a chunk, the top left quadrant of my face will be my mother's, and what prevents that from being my mother's top left quadrant here and my father's top right quadrant for the upper head, and on my chin something else? In other words, because I saw in the book that the resemblance of the offspring from the parents is actually by chunks. Obviously it's coded, at the very, very fine level, at the nano level there. But it is like you have, for example, the upper face of your dad, resembling your dad, and the lower of your mom. And the two will put together to make your... Is that the correct simplified view of it, Susan? Do you get what I'm trying to say?
We just had that happen in our family. I don't know if I get what you're trying to say scientifically, but we just had a grandson, and knowing his father as I do, because I was there when he was born and raised him, this kid has his dad's eyes and his mother's smile. And it's just really distinct to me. I can just see it immediately. And he's only, a month old.
See, Susan, if I can give you what I saw. I started when you said your upward spirals. Fuller would say it's an outward spiral.
Oh, thank you.
But no. It's important to understand that, not because I'm wanting to correct you.
No, it expands.
Because what happens is if you look at those drawings and we see them, and you start to look at them, each one of them represents a tetrahedron. And so when you start to look at it, when you see the point, it starts at a point, and it goes to the other point. But when he talks about one has to be with the other, but so that's one duality. But you have to have the second duality, which is two, which now makes a tetrahedron. Right? Does everyone understand what that means? So you've got the ladder. So if you see, he calls it a ladder, and he actually calls it a structure. I wouldn't call that the structure. He's talking about the parts that make up the structure. So the outside of the structure is actually tetrahedral. And then when you look at it, if you look at, where it has the separations, where it seems to twist and turn, you've got the twist and the turn. So it's twisting, and to go to Manu's point, when you start to look at how it develops, it has a flexibility. What gives it the flexibility? As he says it's moving across, you've got the structure. So he's saying the outside structure, and he actually he draws the boundary of the outside structure, right? So it actually has a single bond. So between there's a single bond, which means it'll collapse in to create the density. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? So he makes the point of density, and he talks about nanometers or thousandth of whatever. But it actually collapses into itself because it has a single bond like air. But if you look at it on the side, it's a double bond. So either side of it's bonding, and when it does that, it's actually can move in and out of that on that part of the DNA structure that he's talking about. But then all of a sudden, you get into the four. So you've got the duality, and then you've got the if you like, the quadrant bonding. The quadrant bonding equals all four of those in that, and then it has the flexibility of a single bond, a double bond. The outside is a triple bond, and when you start to look at it, it's a quadribond. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think we're gonna come up. There's some other things that actually go into more the three-dimensional structure of this. And so Kelly, as I was, because I've listened to this several times, but what I kept seeing was complementary. Unity is plural, minimum of two. No matter which of those base pairs you have, it predicts for the next one.
Yes.
And the other thing that I see completely is movement and spiral movement. And you talked about that collapsing in. So one of the things that we'll see as we get to DNA replication and building of proteins is the movement out to open and allow the transcription pieces to come in and copy pieces of it. And so we'll get that movement going.
That's a triangle.
Nice.
That's a triangle that's cut. And you can start to see what it does.
Yeah.
Now imagine if it goes that way.
Well, and then my resident science guy found out that the structures, one was rotating this way and the other structure was rotating complementary the other way to get this unified spherical shape.
Yeah, that's the double bond because it twists. And so when you're looking at that, he says, well, we've got this ladder that's twisting. But in my reality, what you've got is single bond, double bond, triple bond, and quadrubond. And so when you're looking at it from just the design of just about anything, that's what you're looking at is that. And that's where Fuller goes into describing his quadrubond.
I'm going to need more time on quadrubond, and I'll try and see if I can pull some stuff out of synergetics this week to understand it better.
Okay, but maybe I can beat you to the punch, and I'll definitely have something on it because I've been studying that. I've been studying the bonding. So in terms, he's talking about all the elements that are in that and saying that's its structure. I don't necessarily, my mind says that's not necessarily its structure, that's the elements inside the structure. The structure is a very flexible, it can be a dense structure, right? Or it can be a loose structure, but it's flexible. What creates the flexibility? And it's the different bondings.
It's the design, yeah.
It's the design and the bondings. And that's why, you know, you look at it and they say, oh my gosh, a rat's got this, a mouse has got this, and a tree's got this. It's all very similar structural design. And then they talk about the elements inside the structural design. So for the first time, like when you're writing it down, you can see, okay, there's this, that's its duality. Now you're going to see where it has to have this and this. That's what creates the structure. But it's already inside, as he drew the white line on the outside, it already has the boundaries and then the stuff going between it. But those are what gives it the flexibility. It's not like a staircase that you walk up. It's like it twists and it turns. So if you listen to Fuller, he says it twists, it turns, it folds. The second he uses the word density, it folds into itself. So how can it fold into itself to create Manu's face? Right, so we've got this huge density of what's going on here. And so what's creating that is the DNA and the RNA, and it's the structure of that with all the elements in that structure. That's what I picked up out of it anyway. That's just my point of view when I looked at it. So it's spirals and interspirals, in and out. So that's what I picked up, Susan.
I'm loving it. Hey, Rolf, anything for you, Rolfers?
Mute, yeah. Yeah, I picked up also the unit is plural and the tetrahedron. Again, Kelly's went beyond that, so I'm grateful for that. So also what I take is, again, you have 6 billion, and we are all made of 6 billion, say, particles, so to make one of us. And you look at that combined, then we understand how diverse and how similar we are. So that's also fascinating, and to understand that, again, as beings, we come from the same place, and we share structure with the rest of the universe. So that to me is fascinating, and how we as beings have gone beyond that. And again, we go back to our initial discussion about these spiritual energies that we all have. It counts. So that to me is fascinating, and to see the connection, how evolved we are, and how that relates to who we are and what makes us beings. And different beings. The fact that we are here together, again, we have somebody like Henry or like me or Manu for that matter, and we are different. At the same, we are the same. We share the same structures. You know that in today's world, most people, well, some people still believe as, well, it's okay to be white, it's wrong to be dark. See what I mean? and you have some, and the fact is, if we understand where we all come from, our genetic structure, our DNA, and what we share originally with the universe, we have a completely different perspective about where we come from and where we're going as a species. So again, fascinating. So thank you, Susan, for that.
And I'll make a comment on that, Raphael. When you go to the 6 billion, it doesn't divide by 2, it divides by 4.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
It can't divide by 2 because, Susan, when you're talking about the unity of it, you say unity is plural at a minimum of 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the second you have, and you need to pronounce these for me because I didn't hear it well, the adenine, is it, and the thymine?
Adenine, thymine.
Yeah, that creates 1. But the thing that makes it go to 2 is when you put in the other one. It's crystalline, and what's the other?
Guanine and cytosine.
Yeah, guanine and cytosine. That's another 1. So that's your duality there. Your duality is not the first 2. The duality is all 4 of them. That creates the 2.
A tetrahedron.
That's the tetrahedron, exactly right. And now that's your quadratic bond. Because you can't see it. Most times we think unity is plural at a minimum of 2, and then we say, well, we've got this man, woman. That might equal 1, but there's got to be something else. Because it won't get to where we need to do on the bonding side of it. That's where Fuller brought in the bonding. And so for me now, when I'm looking at it,
and non-physical.
Yeah, physical, non-physical, exactly. And so now what you're looking at, our language has to go from 2, which is mono. So when you're looking at it, it becomes mono when you say, oh man, that's mono. Then you go into women, man, woman. That actually goes into unity, but it's still only 1. Now you have to get the unity as plural at minimum of 2. Do you understand what I'm saying?
It really did just pop for me. Thank you.
And
let me come from a different angle here.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, you remember we talked about the atomic number of different elements some time ago. We also mentioned eukaryotes.
Right.
We are all eukaryotes. And we talk about boundary, and the way eukaryote arose from boundaries that different molecules come together in a cavity like a sack, and then you have a boundary and there are exchanges, isn't it?
Yes.
And there are rules. So if in the beginning you say you take the different molecule at that level, you say double bonding is like in the liquid. But let's just put it this way. It's like if you take a ladder, a real ladder, is a rung, you have the rungs of a ladder, and then you have the 2 poles that are rigid. Now, if you want to contain that information that is extended into a cavity, you have to have torsion, isn't it? Like this.
Torsion.
When you have torsion, information is compressed into it. And when you have that torsion, imagine that you have flexible ropes and then rungs in between, like the ladder that you use to climb on a boat, Kelly, or on a platform in those old days.
Yeah, but Manu, just slow down for a second, because the second you're talking about is a ladder and a rung, you're talking about compression and tension,
Yes.
right?
But I'm
You've only
introducing,
got you've got no flexibility in the compression and the tension. Now what you're saying is you bring in the new element, which is torque. And
yes,
the torque gives it its flexibility. So the second you go to torque,
now you
that
start having the tetrahedron. And you
right,
start having compression and containment of information.
yes, and that's where
Yes.
you get your flexibility. And it
Yes.
and exactly that's exactly how I see it too. Is when you see the ladder represents compression and tension until you can get the flexibility, which is the twisting and the turning, comes from the double bond. Is that the point you're making?
Yes. And I'm saying that you need that, you're evoking
Absolutely need
some
it.
of the degrees of freedom,
Yes.
in the Bucky language, to be able to store information. Because that is storage of information. That's organization to store information in a limited space.
Yes, but
Bounded space.
the other key to it is the outside boundary. So as it's coming around, that outside boundary is tension and compression, the in and the out, and with its bonding allows for the flexibility, the twisting and the turning, right? And then you have the torque.
Yes.
Folding. So it'll fold. And now you're starting to get unity is plural at a minimum of 6.
Mm.
That's where you start to get to that. That's the point you're making, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Get that because of the 3 axes of space that you would be talking about to pop into a 3D structure. So that's why you get 6 axes.
Well, I need to think more about that. I always get confused when people are talking about 3Ds and stuff like that because my mind.
Because X and Y.
Yeah. I get that's what people say, but that I can't see it like that because.
But when you take the whole that universe.
Yes.
And you say inside you is the universe. That inside you encompasses all the 6 degrees of freedom.
Yes.
That Fuller talks about. And those sets, yeah.
The second you go there, life is a scenario. Life is not a system. Like Fuller will say, universe is not a system. Universe is a scenario.
Yes.
A life is not a system. A life is a scenario. So every one of our
design what you say, you are saying life is the design.
Yeah, life is a design that lives in a scenario.
Yes.
Yes, that's what I would say. Yes. Does that make sense? I can see Steve's going, oh my gosh. All right, Susan, we're at time. So you want to wrap it up?
I'm going to start because it just is on. We talked a lot today about spiritual energy and that physical, non-physical. So I want to say that I feel maybe it's more the shadow of Fred staying with us in spiritual energy, even though he's opted out with his physical presence. And I want to say that Kent now has more degrees of freedom to move. And so I have a feeling of being here today. And may each of you kind of have that opening, and maybe Kent will come and whisper to us individually. And now that he has more degrees of freedom, maybe he'll be able to interact with us differently. And I'm loving getting to share this stuff with you and look at it from nobody else could take this basic stuff and help me see some of these exploded possibilities. So thank you. Henry, what did you get and what is your takeaway? How do you feel?
I'm feeling great. Takeaway was, I love the part about genetic coding, how he showed that, because I'd kind of seen it before, but not in that way, not been taught that way. So that made a lot of sense, because the other part we talked about was DNA replication. And so you talk about 6 billion base pairs, 46 chromosomes. That was really significant, because when Manu started talking about, what about my father? What about my mother? How am I looking so similar? Because when I was talking to Kelly just before everybody joined in, he said, you're looking more like your son. It's like, how many, then that thought goes, how many chromosomes, how many base pairs have been replicated that are so similar on a physicality scale? It's like, quite a few of them. So that's what I got out of it. Thank you very much for sharing, Susan. Raphael, how do you feel, and what did you get out of the session?
No, I feel great again. It's always a great experience to be part of this group and to learn and share so much. And again, it goes beyond the physical, definitely. And what my takeaway is, again, going back to Bucky, I mean, how through observation we can see, and with new tools and more development, we can actually start to see the bricks, the actual building blocks of the universe at nano level and at macro level. So again, to me, it's a macro experience all over again. And the fact that I can share and learn from all of you, and I look at all of these things in a different perspective and learning new stuff, and again, getting deeper into the physical. I find fascinating how it relates to the metaphysical. So that's my takeaway today. So thank you for that. How about you, Wayne? How are you feeling, and what's your takeaway?
My takeaway, and I guess it overpowers my feelings as well, is what it seems to always be when we talk about DNA. My takeaway today was specifically where he talked about how it replicates. If you have one half, the other half will reform, and so that's how it divides and multiplies. I'm astounded by the intelligence that exists at that level in life, and it gives me a sense of reverence and awe for grand original design. Steve, how about you? How do you feel this at the end of the call?
Well, I thought I understood tetrahedron until now. So I'm looking at that. This group is really exciting to me, because I really am I've been going through this whole thing about time and about creation. There's a Hopi story that that creator wanted to give a gift to the two-leggeds that they could create their own reality, but he wanted to hide it, or creation, not he. Creation wanted to hide the gift, and so the salmon said, "Let me bury it in the ocean." Creation said, "No, the humans will find it." And then buffalo said, "Let me bury it in the plain," and creation said, "No, they'll dig it up." And the eagle said, "Well, I'll fly it to the moon," and creation said, "No, the two-leggeds will certainly get there and find it too. We want to hide this." And one Mother Earth, who's blind, said, "Let's hide it within them." Creation said, "Okay, we're going to do that." And so I'm coping with that in this whole idea of that the only thing that stops me from floating is me. There's a time 150 years ago where the world was pretty fixed, and so I look around and there were horses and carts. Maybe there was a time before there was a wheel. How do I invent a wheel? And now we're sitting in a time where there is so much synthesis going on and so much synergy going on. These ideas are blowing me away. What my belief system is that's stopping me from floating. Why do I have to walk anywhere I go? Okay, that's what just came up for me today. So I'm so excited about this group and the fact that I don't go anywhere else to get challenged, and so I love the challenge. Thank you, Susan, for blowing my brains out today. And so let's see here. We got Raffers. You've already done yours. Are we complete? Kelly?
Manu.
Maybe your turn.
Have you gone?
No, not yet.
No, Manu hasn't gone yet.
Go ahead. You go.
Okay, good.
What do you take away?
Sorry, Mana.
I feel grateful. At the same time, I want to venture in kind of coining a derivative of Fuller's, that unity is plural at the minimum fundamental of two. You get me?
Yes, I agree.
Unity is plural at the minimum fundamental of two. And this design is so amazing. I was reading this morning of two things, from on the trail of last week of the IPS. This doctor who tried to inject some induced pluripotent stem cells into somebody's eyes, directly in the bid to regenerate some cells in the eyes, and the person became blind. Another one was on the face, and the face started ossifying, right, becoming just rigid. And at that fundamental, it calls home to me the insistence of Fuller that we really need to be educated and continue to try to grasp and understand what's going on in this great design. And really, maybe the examination of us is the choice of a design that we want to, the artifacts or whatever that you want to do to improve this life of the common, of the many. And that education is, to me, very fundamental to understanding the risk of eugenics at the same time as the expectation and the promise of this fundamental kind of leap in understanding of the creative design. And that's what I take from here. Thank you all guys for contributing so generously. Susan, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Wayne and everybody. Kelly, to you.
Okay, so what I take, Steve, I love your analogy of we'll hide it inside them. Right, and so they have to explore the inside. I love that. But what I put to you is this. One of the gravest things, we all talk about this, global warming and all of that other stuff. But the most harmful thing to me is we're damaging seed stock. And I'm talking about seed. S-E-E-D, seed. We are encoded seeds. And if you can't work out that we're damaging the encoding of our own seeds, when we put lead poisoning or people get mercury or lead or whatever, we're damaging our seed crops for generation. When we have malnutrition in our seeds, we will damage our seed stocks. And so when we get into this idea that, economically we can solve the problem of global warming and all the rest of it, we got to solve the first problem first. We're damaging our seed stock. And to your point, Susan, when you said, well, about goodness and them not understanding goodness, right? That's because we've damaged seed stock. We're not into regenerative processes. We're almost into non-regenerative processes. We are designed to regenerate. We're regenerative. But if you damage the seed stock, what are you regenerating? So I would put to you that the reason why you're getting more and more of the stuff that's going on is damaged seed stock. And unless we start talking about that, I mean, that sounds like crazy. People are going to say, well, what's it about seed? It doesn't matter whether it's a trait. It's still encoded. we are encoded, and they're encoded in the seed. And the fact that that's a simple seed, when you throw in a seed in the ground, and I'm sure plenty of people have done it, you throw that seed in the ground, you put a tomato seed in the ground and you see, how the hell did I get that? You put a barley seed in the ground, and you put in 45 pounds of barley seed in the ground, and you say, how in the hell did I get 2 tons of barley seeds? Right? That's encoded. That's encoded seeds. Monsanto has destroyed regenerative seeds because they want you to buy a mono seed. We're destroying the seed stock of our children by destroying whatever it is that's going on in the way that we encode those seeds. Lead poisoning, all the stuff that's going on around alcoholic poisoning, all the stuff around carbon, all the stuff around cigarettes. We know, Steve, guess what? We found it inside ourselves, and we see all these damaging things, but we say, hell, it's going to affect mono money. And we're saying, Jesus Christ, you know, Trump, he's doing a heck of a job. That guy's doing a heck of a job because we got more money. But we're killing the seed. We don't get it. We're seeds. And when you look at that DNA structure, it doesn't matter whether it's a rat, a cat, right? Oh, no, no. Why don't we compare it to a machine and see what a machine does? A machine doesn't have that sort of structure. We put it inside the machine, but we're organic seeds. And unless we start to really understand that, we're going to get to a point where, you know, when you have a 16-year-old girl leading the planet around like we got a ring in her nose because she actually feels it, and people are saying, oh, she should go to school, she should go to school, she's skipping school, she's probably telling us the most important thing we can see. Yes, the beauty of organic. So it really upsets me. The more we look at this thing, the more we get it, but we're still stuck with mono money. Mono money is, you know, we got this thing, we got exchange, but we don't have the structure that actually allows it to regenerate without harming, right? It is harmful, and it's an exchange mechanism that's not going to regenerate. I think that's pretty obvious. So I'm on my high horse, and I apologize for that. But Susan, that's where it leads me. But every time I look at this stuff, I'm saying, well, you know what? We've just damaged that seed stock. You know, Flint, Michigan, I don't know whether, you know, and now I'll go to the harshness of Fred. I don't know if we can allow those kids to breed. We got too many of us now. Someone's going to have to make this hard decision about that seed stock. Right? I don't want to make that decision. What I'd rather say is we've got to correct it. We've got to get on board with it, and we've got to accept we have to manage it. That's my point. And the same thing with drug use and everything else. We've got to get on board with it. So that's where I said, Susan, you want to have the last word, please?
Just love how we come back around to principle. And thank each of you for really shining the light of Bucky's intelligence and appreciation of design back at this on so many levels. Yeah, if you're okay, I'll find some more pieces as we go deeper into DNA and maybe RNA and then building of proteins. I kind of think that's where the intent was for us to go with this piece, and then whatever's next. So looking forward to it.
Yes, go for it.
Wayne, just go ahead, Manu.
Yes, I was just going to say that this is so current, is so much the close feature and the far feature, and it's so intersecting today. This is a major trend. The whole bio, whatever. I mean, is the least understood by lay people like us, and is of really great educational value to us, to me in particular. I would really like to understand, not to grasp, but to understand a little bit what's going on.
Okay, thank you, Manu. Wayne, I finally found what we were talking about in the book around agreements, about the tensile strength of agreements.
Uh-huh.
I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
Can you send it to all of us, Kelly?
Yeah, I will. It's by a professor out of Harvard, and it's on will and agreements and around agreements that are made. And she takes a very different view to a lot of the stuff that I've seen, but it really talks about how important the agreement is. And you can read it for yourself to interpret it the way you want to interpret it. But I really think the tensile strength of our beingness is the words and the language that we use and the contact and the agreements and contracts that we create. And it seems to me I'm so upset about money being more important than anything else. It just drives me nuts, because all it's going to do is lead us into poor seed stocks. I mean, that's taking.
Can you send us in the chat box the author, okay, on the email, the author and the title?
It's all referenced. You can choose to go. It's a heavy duty book. And if you want to go into it, I mean, it's taken me now 3 weeks to get to this point, but it's heavy duty.
Audible is not available on Audible?
Yes, it is available on Audible, and I listened to it for a totally different reason. Because it's referring to digital design, I'm listening to digital design. But funny, the thing that crops up was agreements that we have around digital design and what it's doing to the brain and the mind. So Wayne and I have been going on for a couple of years about agreements and, you know, the tensile strength of an agreement. So we're getting compressed and all the rest of it, but I'll send it out. I promised Henry already, but I'll send it out. But I wanted to make the point to Wayne that I finally found someone that says it way better than I do.
And Wayne, do we have an update on your surgical planning?
I'm scheduled for surgery on the 11th of April.
Okay.
And Susan, tell me if I can indulge everybody for just a second. He said he's going in through the side of my neck, behind the throat.
Nice.
Do I need to worry about the neck and, you know, recovery and my voice and all that? Is there anything I should be telling the doctor? Don't mess with my voice. I try to sing once in a while.
The lateral approach has some really nice, it's staying away from the carotid, from the esophagus, from the larynx. So that's kind of nice. Do you have to worry? I would not worry, because worry is meditation upon the negative, and that's just going to attract more negative in. Get a fair assessment of what he thinks the concerns are. But it sounds like a big investment, and it feels like, on a feeling sense to me, it feels like this is where it was leading, and for reasons that you could not have predicted.
Yeah, exactly.
Ever going away.
I sent the information to my attorney and said, hey, go do your job. I need another extension.
Yeah.
So we'll see where it goes, but I appreciate all that confidence, and thank you. That's the update.
All right, good. So are we complete?
I am.
Thank you, Henry.
Yeah. Love you all, eh? Really enjoyed seeing you, all of you.
Good to see you, Henry.
You're looking really well, Wayne.
Thank you. Give your wife a big hug for us, too.
Okay.
Yeah.
See you.
Tell her I want to come to New Zealand and put a puzzle together with her.
You're always welcome.
She's a puzzle lover.
She is. You're all welcome.
Love to Anna
See
too,
you guys.
Kelly.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's probably not asleep because she can hear us.
Yeah, big hug to her.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, guys.
All good, guys.
Have a great week.
Cheers. Bye.